Okie doke. So I've drawn a circle and a line. That hopefully shouldn't be too difficult for you. If you're wondering what the size is, it's just a 6.5mm radius circle drawn in paper space. Double click on the edge of the circle if you want to see the properties. And you can always adjust it there if you need to. So now I'm going to go into the Annotation panel on the Home tab and make a text style. So clicking on the little button there with the letter A opens up text styles. We've made one before for the grids, but I'm going to make one that's a little bit different for the page. So I've been showing you a little bit about this annotate option or annotative option, but I'm going to make a text style that's exclusively for my layout or for paper space, and so I'll call this layout text, just to be clear. And there's a bit of an error when you make or when you try to use annotative in paper space, especially with things like attributes. It can actually cause problems. So often it's a good idea to turn that annotative option off. You're working in paper space anyway, so you can set a height over here, and that will be the height it prints. So when you're printing and drawing text from the layout, the height you type is the height you get. And so here I'll use Arial just to be boring, and so clicking apply sets all of those options, and I'll also make sure it's current up there. You can see it's layout text. So I'm just going to close this, and then I'll go and just use single line text for now. Click a point and then press enter to keep the rotation at 0, and I'm going to make this 1 and maybe just adjust the position slightly using the grip there. And then I'm going to copy the text down below. Might turn ortho on. And then just make that into a dash. And again, I'll just fine tune the position. You can use Justification, just like Word, in AutoCAD, but sometimes it's easier just to pick things up and move them. So it might be a little bit large actually. Maybe I'll make that 3.5. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. I should have made that smaller. So all I did there was just go to Properties by selecting it and then right-clicking. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, so if you go and change the text style like we looked at last week, that'll only change text you make after. It's one of those funny things. If you change the font, it will change it. So if I change this to a different font, I'll change it to another one. So you can see the font's changed, but the height doesn't. So this one, even though it's just a dash, it's still 4.5. So I can make it 3.5 as well, I suppose. And I could use the same text style now to do a label. So this is going to be a demolition plan. So I'm just going to click a start point, enter. So that's okay. And then it's yeah, I did. Yeah. So I just did that as an example. You could leave it if you want to. You don't need to change it, but I just did that so you can see that when you change the font in the text style, it will update the text you've done with that style. So layout text Now it's got this font and it's all changed to the matching font, but the height, funnily enough, doesn't change. It's one of those funny things about AutoCAD. Well, it's not funny. There's a reason they've left it like that. You'll see it does kind of make sense. Because you often do text to fit in a certain area, and when you go and make changes later, you don't want all the text you've done previously to fit exactly somewhere to go and change automatically. Okay, so I really just wanted to show you that first before we look at doing some text in the viewport. And I know we did a little bit of this before with the grid, but I just wanted to go over it a bit more. So I'm going to double click and make that viewport active. And then I'm going to hide the grid because I just think that's an annoying thing to look at. And it doesn't affect anything to do with the printing or anything. But so now, making sure the viewport's locked, I can zoom in without the scale changing, so we can see there that's 1 to 50. And I'm going to go back to my annotation panel and make another text style. So clicking on the new button over here, and I'm going to call this Notes. And a good text style for notes is Roman S. So you have these old SHX fonts, so it's just an old format before TTF. And they still are good for some things, like these single line and double line fonts. So Roman S is a single line font, Roman D is a double line font, Roman T is a triple. And I'm going to make the height for this 2.5. And then I am going to tick annotating for this one. And then apply. So now that's the current style. So what I really wanted to show you there is that if I go and make some text here, now you really don't need to note everything that's going to be demolished. I'm just putting this here as an example because we won't need much more text until later. So just going to click here and I'll say remove, oops, existing aluminium door and window. Okay, so notice how that's the right size, even though I'm doing it inside a viewport. And I'm just going to make another viewport, which you don't have to do, but just so you can see how this all works. Okay, so I've got the viewport down here, which I'll set to 1 to 100. And I'm just going to go and draw some more text. Okay, so notice how the text is exactly the same size in these two different viewports. So this one's 1 to 100, this one's 1 to 50, but the text is the same size. Now if I go and show you the text back in the Model tab, it should really make it clear what that annotative option is doing for you. So here's the text I did in the 1 to 100 viewport, and I'm going to copy that across and put it right next to the text I did in the 1 to 50 viewport. So notice how it's exactly double the height of the 1 to 50 text. Okay, so I'm going to go to layout 2, or my second layout, and you can see there that even though I've put this text here, corridor, right next to the other text, notice how it doesn't show up in this viewport. So that annotative option does that for you as well. When you set the text to a certain size, it controls the visibility, so it doesn't show up in viewports of a different scale. So I'll just prove that to you once more. So if we go here, I'll make it 1 to 20. So I'll make some more text. And so this might be a note for a detail. So I'll just put detail note. Right, so that's tiny. And again, it's right next to the other text. Let's put it right up here, right under it. But still, in my viewport, that doesn't show. Okay, so these things will be clearer to you maybe if you actually try this, and you'll see how it all works. But you have to try it to get it to work and understand it. What it's really doing is what Revit does for you automatically. And this is actually why I'm not a huge fan of people being taught Revit before they really know AutoCAD, because Revit does so much for you and you don't really know what's happening until you really learn everything. And then if you know how to draft by hand and do everything manually, then these things are really clear instantly. But until you've at least done it either by hand or with AutoCAD, it's not clear why all those things in Revit are good, but what's actually happening there. And so again, this annotative option does all of those things for you. And if you don't use annotative, well, I promised I'd show you the old way, and this is, I'm sure, what John would teach you, and Araj probably as well, and most of the other teachers here would still just teach the old way. And that would be, you might have seen this before, to make a text style for each scale. Right, and you would have seen this, a lot of offices still use this approach. It's the old way. AutoCAD hasn't needed you to use this approach for 20 years, but a lot of people are still in the habit of it. So if you go to the new button there, you can make a style and call it notes. If it was for 1 to 50, we call it notes 50. You wouldn't use the annotative option. And so if I wanted the text to be 2.5 mil high, it'd be 2.5 times 50, which is 125. But then, in addition to that, you would need to make a layer for every scale, and then, and I'll just show you, so I'll do that. So I'll draw my text, and you'll see it's exactly the same size as the text I've done with annotative. So this is old style text. But then in my 1 to 100 viewport, that text is going to show, even though it's not the right height. So you'd have to then make a layer for your 1 to 50 text and freeze it in that viewport. So hopefully you remember that option from last week, using freeze or thaw in current viewport. And we're going to do a lot more of that today. Right, so I think it's a pretty laborious process, doing the old way, because you end up with, for every bit of annotation, a layer for each type of text you do, for each scale, and the same with dimensions. So you need a layer for every different scale that you have for your dimensions as well. So you'll have 1 to 50 dimensions, 1 to 100 dimensions, 1 to 200 dimensions, with their own style and their own layer. And you've got to manually turn them on and off in all the viewports. So if it seems complicated using that annotative option, I mean, it's a little bit of extra work, but it saves you a lot of work in the long run. And yeah, so like I said, the only way to really make that clear is to do it and make it work. If you want to compare those two things in properties, it's a good way of working out how it's all working behind the scenes as well. If I show you this one in properties, you can see it tells me its paper space height is 2.5 mil, but the model text height, notice, is 125, the same as what it was when I did that manually. And then it knows the scale as well. So here it's got the annotative scale, so it knows the scale because the viewport has that scale set to it. So all of those things you get with that annotative option. Otherwise you could do all of that yourself. And so, just to finish up there, you'll need, with the proposed viewport, to have, remember, the layers frozen for demolition. So, oops, I'll turn the grid off there as well. And so then, if you've started doing some text and you've got that working, then you could try copying across your line work from the plan you did, the sketch plan you did with your design. So here, that's basically what I've got there. I've got a very rough sketch plan, and I can now copy these objects across into the drawing that I've got formatted, with the way we've been doing it recently. And so that should be a new drawing, and so then I can bring these things across. So I've just selected everything there that I want, and with copy, as long as I get a base point maybe from the corner there, I should be able to copy these things over. Okay, so I've got those things in my new drawing, and now I can start formatting my views. Okay, so notice how this is meant to be my demolition plan, but it's showing all of those new things. We don't want that. The demolition plan should just show you existing walls and the ones that are going to be demolished. So in my list of layers now, just going a bit further with what we were looking at last week, I can go through and freeze in current viewport all of those layers that are for new things. So I've made, so here my stud walls are on this layer here. So you can see that as I freeze them, they disappear in the viewport on the left, but not the viewport on the right. Okay, so does that make sense? You can see there, that way you can have the two plans being generated from one drawing that you've done in model space, but just different combinations of layers turned on and off. Okay, so I'll give you some time to work on that, but that's the kind of setup you want to aim for, and then we can start looking at drawing in the extra detail, but you need to get that set up initially.